Succession, there are two types of succession, the primary succession and the secondary succession. Ahmed Azam and Salma are joining now. Salma and Ahmed Azam are joining. Okay, you are welcome. Succession, the word
أستاذ سلمى حكت عند الجروب إنه مرة راضي يفوتها.
نعم. لا
حكت سلمى على الجروب إنه
أوكي
خلاص.
I accepted it. طيب. Succession is a series of predictable changes that occur in a community over time. Succession is a series of predictable changes that occur in a community over a period of time or over time. It's a series of predictable changes that occur in a community. The succession can be divided into two types, the primary succession and the secondary succession. Okay, primary and secondary succession. In both cases, there are changes that happen to the community, but of course, they are different. Primary succession is a series of changes also, but a series of changes that occur in an area where no soil or organism exists. So in a primary succession, we start with an area with no organisms, with no soil. Then organisms start to colonize this area. The first organisms that colonize the area are called pioneer species. Pioneer species are mainly lichens. These lichens decompose, release acids or give off acids, and these acidic compounds, because they are strong, they can break or dissolve the rocks, and the rocks change to soil, and the pioneer species help us or are very important in primary succession because they give the area a soil. Now, when the soil is formed, seed-producing plants come to the area by birds. Seed-producing plants come to the area and start to grow. These seeds come to the area by wind, water, and birds. Then, after the plants start to grow, animals come, and by time or by the time the community matures and we have a mature community or a complete ecosystem, this process takes a long period of time. Primary succession happens very slowly. It takes a very long period of time since there is no soil present. But in a secondary succession generally happens after a disturbance. When a disaster, like for example, fires, when a devastating fire happens, irrespective of this fire by human activities or naturally, the ecosystem is destroyed, but it can recover after a short period of time since the soil is available. Soil and organisms are already exist. So the first important and the first important difference between secondary succession and primary succession is that in secondary succession, soil and organisms are already exist. So after a short period of time, few years, the ecosystem recover again and plants, the seeds of the plants grow because they are already exist. Even the forest, for example, if the forests are destroyed or burned, the seeds is still in the soil. So after a short period of time, the seeds start to grow again and the new plants form, and the animals that escape from the area will return back to this area. So the differences between primary and secondary succession. Secondary succession occurs in place where an ecosystem and community exist. Not like primary succession, there is no organism, no soil. And it happens more rapidly. Occurs, secondary succession occurs more rapidly. طيب. Now, is it clear, شباب فاهمين؟
Yeah.
طيب. The last subject.
يا أستاذ فهمت.
The last subject.
Yes, أستاذ.
What?
Yes, بقول لك
Okay.
clear.
The last subject in this lesson, is the ecosystem disruptions and population survival. طيب. As we all know that when a disaster or when changes to a physical and biological components occur rapidly or lastingly, most population in the ecosystem do not survive. Suppose that, for example, we have a volcano. Volcanoes, earthquakes, devastating fires. These changes are called, these changes can cause a rapid change to the environment. These disasters or these disruptions are rapid because they can destroy or kill organisms very, very quickly. In general, when a disruption like these things happens, like earthquakes, volcanoes, fires, most organisms or most populations do not survive. Okay? Most populations in the ecosystem do not survive when such disruptions happen. However, some organisms do survive the changes. Some organisms can tolerate this. Some organisms do survive. Even we have a devastating event, even we have a disaster. طيب. Nada, what do you want to anything? Do you need anything? Is there something unclear?
تيتر بتقول لك سارة إنه عندها الكونكشن كتير ضعيف وطلعها من الزوم.
خليها ترجع مش مشكلة.
أوكي.
طيب. Let's take an example for such organisms that can survive these changes. Or before that, organisms surviving a fast changing ecosystem often have special adaptations that help them thrive. Thrive means grow in the new condition.
How will you teach?
Okay, so organisms, either plants or animals that can survive in a fast changing ecosystem often have special adaptations. طيب. Let's take an example in Georgia, in the South Carolina. This is a state in the United States. طيب, and Florida. طيب, they have an ecosystem of the longleaf pine. I think that you know the pine tree. The longleaf pine forest, okay, shown in figure 4. Look at this figure in your book. This is a long, على فكرة الصورة عندك شو أتوقع طلعوا على كتابكم تكون أوضح. This is a longleaf pine tree or pine forest. As you know, for a pine tree has leaves. Their leaves are different from the trees or other trees. For example, they have a long leaf. Their leaves are long leaves. Okay, طيب. Long leaf pine trees dominate this ecosystem. Or in this ecosystem, the most dominant tree is the longleaf pine. طيب. These trees grow in a pattern that permits sunlight to reach the forest floor. Okay, in many forests, especially in rainforests, because the cover of the plants or the trees are very thick, there are a lot of trees. Sometimes in some forests, the sunlight can't reach the floor of the forest, the floor of the forest. But in the case of longleaf pine, they permit the sunlight to reach the forest floor. And as you know, sunlight is very important for the growth of plants, for the growth of all plants, because without sunlight, plants that live at the floor of the forest can't make photosynthesis. So these trees, again, grow in a pattern that permits or allow the sunlight to reach the forest floor. Longleaf pine seeds need a soil free from undergrowth and germinate quickly in the soil. So in this case, notice this adaptation. Why the longleaf pine trees adaptation is important. They allow or permit sunlight to reach the forest floor so that the seeds, the new seeds of these pine trees can grow. Okay, when the sunlight reaches the floor, the new seeds that is found in the soil can grow. Again, longleaf pine seeds need a soil free from undergrowth and germinate quickly in the soil. Germinate means when a seed germinate, that means it starts to go. If you remember the plant life cycle, the plant life cycle starts with a seed. Then if the conditions are good, if there is water, if there is sunlight, the seed will germinate. Okay, so germination is the first stage or the first step in the plant life cycle. Right. Is it clear?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, teacher.
Longleaf pines are dependent on regular forest fires, from lightning strikes to burn away grasses and invasive hardwood trees such as oak to remain healthy and reduce. Look, this is very interesting point. Longleaf pines, they like fires. Yani these types of organisms or these trees prefer or like fires because in these forests, fires happens in a regularly because of lightning. When lightning strikes, it burns the forest. So these forests or the fires that happen in these forests, the major cause of these fires is natural. It is lightning. When lightning strikes, the forest is burned, but these types of plants, the longleaf pines, survive. How? Because these fires burn away what? Grasses and invasive hardwood trees. Do you remember the word invasive?
أستاذ عادي أروح الحمام بسرعة.
على العمان؟
الحمام.
طيب okay. Take a taxi. طيب. These forests are good for the longleaf pine trees. Why? Because they burn away grass and other trees like oak, and to remain healthy and reproduce. So the seeds of the longleaf pines can grow. طيب. Mature trees, bark, and early growth are fire resistant. Also, look at the...
Teacher, I'm sorry, الإنترنت فصل عندي.
طيب مش مشكلة. So, look at the adaptations of longleaf pines. First, they grow in a pattern that permits sunlight to reach the forest floor. This is the first one. Okay?
Which page?
This page 250. The first adaptation for these organisms that they permit sunlight to reach the sun floor. the first floor, and their bark are fire resistant. What is the bark of the tree? What is the bark of the tree? Do you know? طيب.
The bark of the tree is the.
It is the stem of the tree.
Okay.
Fine. So, in general, I want you to know that some organisms like these long leaf pines are can tolerate or can survive in disasters that may happen to the environment, like fires. Okay, because they have a special adaptation. They have a special adaptation. For example, their barks are the bark of these trees and the early growth are fire resistant, sorry, and they can grow in a pattern that permits sunlight to reach the first floor, so the seeds can grow. طيب. Long leaf pines, okay, support a healthy ecosystem. Red cockaded woodpeckers dependent on mature trees for nesting sites. Do you know this bird? The woodpecker. This type of bird prefer long leaf pines. If fires do not burn the undergrowth, predators can reach the nests. Look, subhanallah, also other organisms depend on the longleaf pines. So, if this bird, the red cockaded woodpeckers, depend on what? Mature trees of longleaf pines for nesting. It builds or it takes the longleaf pine as a shelter. It makes its nests there. If fires do not burn the undergrowth, okay, when a fire happens, it burns everything under the ground. Predators, for example, some animals can reach the nest of this bird and kill for example, the eggs or destroy the eggs or destroy the nest. طيب. Swallowed-tailed kites build nest high in the trees also. And Backman's sparrow favor mature pine forest where underbrush has been removed. So, in general, the longleaf pine, okay, support what? System, because other organisms like bears depend on these trees to build their nests. These bear populations have been reduced due to logging of the longleaf pines. Notice, people cut down a lot of longleaf pines. Of course, bears populations like these bears mentioned earlier depend on these trees for nesting. So this will reduce the population of these bears. Again, these bear populations like the red cockaded woodpeckers, the populations of these birds have been reduced due to logging of the longleaf pines. Logging means cutting, okay? And previous fire suppression practices, okay? What does it mean, previous fire suppression practices? يعني because there are a lot of fires that happens in these forests, people make practices that reduce the fires. But subhanallah, fires are good for longleaf pines. Fires are good for many animals or many bears that live there. So logging of trees, logging of longleaf pines, and also the previous fire suppression practices, all of these are not good for these forests, for the longleaf pines, for the bears that live there. Type why? Because the invasive oak will grow, and invasive oak is not good for the longleaf pine. Type. Most organisms reappear at some point after the fire because of adaptations such as heat-resistant seeds. This is, please highlight this word. We mentioned at the beginning of the lesson that some organisms, again, some organisms can survive a fast-changing ecosystem. When a disaster happens, for example, a fire, a volcano, an earthquake, all of these are fast-changing events. They can kill or destroy ecosystems. Many organisms can die and disappear. But also, however, there are organisms that can survive and they can recover quickly. These organisms have special adaptations. An example of these organisms, the longleaf pine. One important adaptation for these organisms, the heat-resistant seeds. In general, seeds of plants can't survive or die in a heat, in fire. But some organisms or some plants, like longleaf pines, their seeds are heat resistant. Okay, so most organisms reappear at some point after the fire because of adaptations such as heat-resistant seeds that may sprout or grow underground roots and can grow. Okay, young longleaf vines develop long taproot that enables them to grow after fire. Type. Look, this is the red, this is the bird, red cockaded woodpecker flies away from the fire to safety. And here, this is the bark of the tree. This is the bark of the tree. As the thick, scaly bark burns, flakes fall off and takes the heat with them. So in this way, this tree will not burn. Yani when a fire happens or when the fire occurs, the thick, scaly bark burns, flakes fall off, and so in this way it protects the tree. The bark will fall. This will protect the fire. طيب. ما بعرف فاهمين ولا لا؟
Yes, teacher.
Are you
لا والله أستاذ.
نعم.
سهل.
طيب.
سهل.
Look, for example, I forgot to show you something. Here, for example, in this figure or in this picture, other organisms, look at this snake. The pine snake escapes fire by seeking shelter in a gopher burrow. Okay? طيب. Also, look here, a long leaf pine seedling. This is a seedling. This is a seedling. The long leaf pine seedling is topped with a moist tuft of needles. Okay. As fire burns the needles, they produce a stem that moves the heat away from the plant and extinguishes the fire. If the needles burn off entirely, the seedling can regrow from its root. Look at these adaptations. So, you can say that the longleaf pine have a special adaptations that enable them to survive even the whole forest is bare. Right. Thank you for listening. Time is over. Goodbye.
Bye, teacher.
Goodbye.